I thought the sound was rats. That's what I told myself the first night. Old houses always have something living inside them. Something in the walls, something in the ceiling, something moving where you can't see it. So when I heard scratching under the floorboards, I chose the easiest answer. Rats. But rats don't stop the second you sit up. Rats don't wait in silence. Rats don't knock 3 times. And they don't whisper your name afterward. Ethan. I didn't move for a second. I just sat there in the dark, listening to the place around me. The room was old enough to have its own language. Wood cooling in the walls. A pipe somewhere, giving a faint tap. The ceiling settling above me. But none of that was the sound I had heard. This came from directly under the bed. I reached for my phone on the nightstand and turned the screen on. The light filled only a small part of the room. Enough to see the dresser. Enough to see the doorway. Enough to see the digital clock beside the lamp. 2:16 a.m. I don't know why that bothered me. Maybe because it felt like I had been sitting there longer. Maybe because the room already seemed behind the rest of the world. I slid off the mattress slowly and aimed the phone flashlight at the floorboards. Old pine, thin gaps between each plank. Dust gathered in the seams. Nothing moving. Nothing broken. Nothing there. I crouched lower and held my breath. Then the clock changed. 2:17 a.m. The second the numbers shifted, 3 knocks struck from below. Harder this time. Close enough to rattle the bed frame. Dust jumped from the cracks in the wood and drifted into the flashlight beam like smoke. I stumbled backward and nearly dropped the phone. The room went still again. No scratching. No footsteps. No sound of anything leaving. Just silence. I stared at the floor and opened the voice recorder without thinking. Maybe I wanted proof. Maybe I wanted to hear something ordinary when I played it back. I pressed record and pointed the phone toward the bed. 10 seconds passed. Then a sound came through the speaker. Low, dry, barely above breath. So faint I almost missed it, but it was clear enough. A voice under the floorboards, and it said my name again. Ethan. I replayed the recording 3 times before I convinced myself to stand up. Each time, the same sound came through the speaker. Static. My breathing. The faint creak of the mattress. Then that whisper. Ethan. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just close. Close enough to feel personal. I told myself there had to be a reason for it. Old phones distort sound. Old houses carry noise through pipes. Voices from outside can travel in strange ways at night. Those explanations were weak, but they were better than the truth I was beginning to imagine. I didn't sleep after that. I stayed in the kitchen until sunrise, with every light on. The house looked smaller in daylight, less threatening. Just an aging 2-story place at the edge of town with peeling paint, leaning porch rails, and trees crowding too close to the windows. The kind of house people pass without looking twice. The kind of house families inherit and sell as quickly as possible. That's why I was there. My grandmother, Margaret, had passed away 6 days earlier. No long illness. No warning. One afternoon, she was watering flowers beside the porch. By evening, she was gone. The lawyer called 2 days later. The property had been left to me. Not to my mother. Not to my uncle. Not divided among anyone else. Just me. No one argued about it. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Families argue over less than an old house. But when I told them Margaret had named me in the will, they all reacted the same way. Quiet. Too quiet. My mother only said, "Sell it fast." My uncle said, "Don't start opening things." Then he hung up before I could ask what that meant. So I came alone. 1 week to clear personal items, sign papers, meet an agent, and leave. That was the plan. Simple. Temporary. The first day went almost normally. Boxes in the attic. Documents in the study. Kitchen drawers full of things no one had touched in years. But there were details that kept catching my attention. Frames hanging on the walls with photos missing from them. Not broken glass. Not fallen pictures. The photos themselves had been removed. Whole rows of empty frames still carefully dusted. I found marks on the backs where pictures had once been slid out in a hurry. Who takes every family photo and leaves the frames behind? I checked closets, drawers, cabinets. Nothing. No albums. No loose prints. No envelopes. Just absence. Then there was the hallway upstairs. I remembered it from childhood because I was never allowed near it. At the far end, between the guest room and linen closet, there had always been a narrow door. Now the entire section was covered with boards nailed across it. Not fresh boards. Old ones, painted over more than once. As if someone wanted the wall to look ordinary from a distance. I ran my fingers across the nails. Some were bent from being driven in too fast. Some had dark stains around them. I stood there longer than I should have, trying to remember what used to be behind that door. I couldn't. That bothered me more than the boards. Margaret had owned an old shepherd mix named Rusty for years. After she passed, my mother asked me to bring him food and let him out while I stayed there. The dog greeted me at the porch each morning and followed me room to room downstairs. But the second I climbed the stairs, he stopped. Every time. He'd stand at the bottom looking up, ears back, tail low, refusing to move. When I called him, he whined. When I carried his bowl halfway up to tempt him, he backed away from it. The only room he reacted worst to was Margaret's bedroom, the room where I had heard my name. He wouldn't cross the doorway. He'd stare into the room, trembling, then retreat without turning his back. Animals notice things people explain away. That thought stayed with me all afternoon. Near sunset, I stepped outside to clear my head. The air was cold and clean, the kind that makes you believe everything strange belongs indoors. My nearest neighbor was an older man named Walter, who lived across the gravel road. I remembered him vaguely from childhood. He was on his porch watching me like he had been expecting me to come out. When I waved, he didn't wave back. He just asked one question. "You sleeping there?" I said yes. Only for the week. He looked at the house for a long time before answering. Then he said something I still hear clearly. "Don't stay past the third night." I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. He didn't. I asked him why. Walter stood up slowly, stepped inside his house, and shut the door without another word. That night would be the second night, and for the first time since arriving, I noticed the sun was already going down. I told myself Walter was trying to scare me. Small towns do that sometimes. They let old stories sit untouched for so long that eventually people start protecting them. That had to be all this was. An old man, an old house, an old warning. Nothing more. So I stayed. That night, I kept every light on downstairs. I checked the locks twice. I moved a kitchen chair beneath the front door handle. I laughed at myself while doing it. Then I carried a flashlight upstairs and entered Margaret's room like it belonged to me. The bed still smelled faintly of cedar and laundry soap, the same scent from childhood, comforting for about 10 seconds. Then the room became what it was again. Too quiet, too still, too aware. I sat on the bed with my phone in my hand and watched the clock crawl forward. 2:11, 2:13, 2:15. The silence became harder to ignore than any noise. Then, 2:17 a.m., a sound moved under the floorboards. Not knocking, not scratching, dragging, slow, like something heavy being pulled across wood beneath the room. It began near the door, then crossed beneath the dresser, then passed under the bed. Every inch of movement could be tracked by sound alone. I lifted my feet onto the mattress without thinking. The dragging stopped directly beneath me. No bump, no impact, just stillness, as if whatever was below knew exactly where I was sitting. I did not sleep that night. Morning made everything easier to dismiss. By breakfast, I almost believed I had imagined the direction of the sound. By noon, I was carrying boxes again. By evening, I was embarrassed by how frightened I'd been. That confidence lasted until the next night. Night 3. I didn't wait in the bedroom this time. I sat in the hallway outside the room with a flashlight, notebook, and the kind of determination people have right before they make bad choices. When the clock downstairs struck 2:17, the first knock came from inside the bedroom. One sharp hit beneath the floor. Then another knock answered from the hallway beneath me. Then another near the staircase. I froze. The knocks were moving. Not randomly. Traveling. One at a time. Across the second floor. Bedroom. Hallway. Closet. Guest room. Back again. Each strike spaced evenly, as if something below the house was tracing the layout overhead. Learning it. Learning me. I stood and backed toward the stairs. The next knock sounded directly beneath my right foot. I nearly fell running downstairs. At sunrise, I checked every room. No damage. No holes. No loose boards. Nothing except a thin line of dust disturbed along the hallway floor, as though something underneath had followed the route from below. I should have left then. Instead, I started making rules. Stay awake before 2:17. Keep lights on. Record everything. Do not panic. Rules help people pretend they still control things. Night 4. I refused to enter the bedroom. I carried a dining chair into the upstairs hall and sat facing Margaret's door. Flashlight in one hand, hammer in the other. I don't know why I thought a hammer mattered. The house stayed quiet until the clock reached 2:17. Then came 3 knocks. Far away, somewhere below the stairs. A pause. Then one knock closer. Pause. Another closer. Then another. Each one closing the distance between us. I gripped the hammer so tightly my hand cramped. The sound reached the hallway. One knock beneath the guest room. One beneath the closet. One beneath Margaret's door. Then silence. I waited. My breathing sounded too loud. Then one final knock. Directly beneath the chair I was sitting on. The wood under me trembled. Not enough to lift. Enough to confirm something was there. I stood so fast the chair toppled backward. The knocking stopped immediately, like it had wanted only that reaction. Morning came gray and cold. I packed 2 boxes and unpacked one. I called the realtor and nearly canceled. Instead, I said I needed more time. I never explained why. Night 5. I was angry. Fear changes shape after enough sleepless nights. Sometimes it becomes anger because anger feels useful. At 2:16, I sat cross-legged on the bedroom floor with my knuckles resting on the boards. I stared at the clock. 2:17. 3 knocks came from below. I hit the floor once with my fist. Silence. Then, from beneath the boards, 1 knock answered. I struck twice. 2 knocks came back. My mouth went dry. I hit 3 times. 3 knocks returned instantly. No delay. No echo. A reply. Something under the house was listening, and it understood the game. I didn't touch the floor again. The moment it answered me, something changed. Until then, I had been dealing with sounds. Strange sounds, frightening sounds, sounds that could still be blamed on wood, pipes, stress, lack of sleep, Anything desperate enough to keep reality intact. But a response is different. A response means presence. Someone? A response means intent. And intent is harder to explain away. I spent the rest of that night sitting against the bedroom wall with the lights on, watching the boards as if they might open at any moment. They didn't. Nothing else happened. No knocks. No dragging. No whisper. Just silence so complete it felt deliberate. By sunrise, I knew I needed answers from somewhere inside the house. Families hide things in two places: basements and attics. This house had no visible basement, so I climbed into the attic. The pull-down ladder groaned under my weight. Dust fell across my shoulders as I pushed the hatch open. The air above was hotter than it should have been, trapped and stale, thick with insulation fibers and the smell of old paper. My flashlight cut through rows of boxes, trunks, and stacked furniture draped in sheets. Most of it was ordinary. Holiday decorations, broken lamps, jars of buttons, receipts tied with twine, the remains of a life no one wanted to sort. Then I found a small cedar box pushed behind two suitcases. No label, no lock, only my name written across the lid in faded black marker. Ethan. I stared at it for a long time before touching it. The handwriting was Margaret's. I knew that immediately. The same careful block letters she used on birthday cards and canned food jars. She had left this there for me, which meant she expected me to come, which meant she expected me to find it. I carried the box into the center of the attic and opened it slowly. Inside were only three things. The first was a child's drawing folded in half, crayon on yellowed paper. A picture of the house from the front yard, crooked windows, a smoking chimney, a stick figure beside the porch. At first it looked harmless. Then I opened the page wider. The house had been drawn transparent, rooms visible inside, kitchen, hallway, stairs, Margaret's bedroom upstairs. And beneath that bedroom floor, a large red X, drawn so hard the wax had torn the paper. I turned the page over. On the back, in uneven child handwriting, "He lives under her room." I knew those letters. They were mine. I had written them as a child. I had no memory of doing it. I dropped the drawing. My hands had started shaking again. The second item in the box was a cassette tape sealed in a plastic bag. Across the label, written in the same black marker, "Don't answer it." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because fear sometimes reaches a point where laughter is the only sound left. There was an old tape player downstairs in the study. I remembered seeing it under a stack of magazines. I took the cassette down carefully, like it might react to being touched. The player needed 2 tries before it worked. Then the tape began. At first, only room noise. A chair shifting, soft static, someone breathing close to the microphone. Then Margaret's voice. Older, tired, barely above a whisper. Not the voice I remembered from birthdays and summer mornings. A worn voice. A voice that had spent too long being awake. She said my name once. Then she said, "If you're hearing this," it started again. A pause. Wood creaked somewhere in the background. Then 3 faint knocks. I nearly dropped the machine. Margaret continued. "Listen carefully." Another pause. Then the sentence I still hear in her exact voice. "If it starts talking, don't reply." The tape hissed. Something scraped in the distance. Margaret inhaled sharply, as if she had heard it too. Then she whispered one final sentence. "It learns people through answers." The tape clicked and stopped. I sat there in the study with the machine in my lap, unable to move. Because suddenly, every strange thing in the house had a shape to it. The missing photos. The sealed hallway. The room she never let me sleep in. The box hidden for me. Margaret had known for years, and whatever lived beneath that floor had already learned my name. So I'll ask you the same question I asked myself that afternoon. Would you stay, or would you leave while the sun was still up? I should have left right then. That would have been the smart version of the story. Take the tape, take the box, get in the car before sunset and never return. But fear does strange things when it mixes with curiosity. If you leave too early, your body escapes, but your mind stays behind. I knew if I walked away without seeing what was under that room, I would think about it for the rest of my life. So instead of leaving, I went upstairs. Margaret's bedroom looked harmless in daylight. Sun through thin curtains, dust floating in warm light, a made bed, a wooden dresser, the same floral rug stretched across most of the floor. A room that belonged in family photos, a room no one in the family ever wanted photographed. That thought hit me hard enough to stop me at the doorway. I went back downstairs and checked the hallway frames again. Empty. Every frame near that bedroom was empty. No pictures of birthdays in the room. No holiday mornings. No relatives standing beside the bed. It was as if everyone had agreed, silently, never to preserve that space. I returned upstairs and stood over the rug. It covered nearly the entire center of the room. Heavy woven fabric, older than I was, edges faded from years of sunlight. I gripped one side and pulled. Dust rose immediately. The rug dragged back inch by inch, exposing dark pine boards beneath. The room felt colder the more floor I uncovered. By the time the rug was folded against the wall, my throat was dry. The wood underneath did not look untouched. It looked worked on. There were long scratches across several planks. Not shallow marks from furniture legs. Deep grooves, parallel in places, jagged in others. Some started in straight lines and ended with sharp turns, as if whoever made them had lost control halfway through. I crouched lower. Near the center of the room were nail heads driven into 3 boards in a rough square pattern. Old nails, but not old enough. The wood around them had been sanded and stained to match the floor. Whoever resealed it wanted the repair hidden. And recently, the stain was newer than everything around it. I ran my thumb across one nail. The metal still held a slight shine under the dust. My pulse started climbing. This wasn't just an old house with old damage. Someone had opened this section before me, and someone had closed it again. Then I saw the burn marks. At first I thought they were dark knots in the pine, but no. These were blackened circles and streaks near the seams between boards. Scorch patterns, as if heat had come upward through the cracks. Or something hot had been pressed against the wood from below. I stepped back instinctively. The room remained silent. No movement, no whisper, only the faint sound of wind outside. Then I noticed one plank near the bed leg looked rougher than the others. Its surface had been scraped with something sharp. I knelt and brushed dust away with my sleeve. Letters began to appear. Crude, uneven, cut deep enough to survive years of wear. 3 words. It copies voices. I read them twice before understanding what I was looking at. Someone had carved that warning into the floor itself. Not on paper, not hidden in a box. Into the wood people walked over every day, as if they needed to remember it constantly, as if forgetting was dangerous. I looked around the room, suddenly aware of how exposed I was. Then from beneath the boards, one knock, hard enough to vibrate through my knees. I jerked backward and slammed into the bed frame. Another knock came immediately after, directly beneath the carved words. Dust burst from the seams around the letters. Then silence. I stared at the floor, unable to breathe for a second. Because for the first time, it wasn't just reacting to time. It was reacting to me discovering something. It knew where I was looking. and it wanted me to know it was still there. I left the room and shut the door behind me. Not because a door could help, because people close doors when they need to feel like something has ended. I stood in the hallway with my hand on the knob, waiting for another knock. Nothing came. The house was quiet again. That quiet had started to feel less like peace and more like attention. I went downstairs, made coffee I didn't want, and sat at the kitchen table staring at Margaret's cassette player. The words carved into the floor kept repeating in my head. It copies voices. At first, I tried to reduce the meaning of it. Maybe someone had written it as a joke. Maybe a relative wanted to scare kids. Maybe the house carried sound strangely, and voices echoed through vents. Every explanation sounded weaker than the last. By late afternoon, clouds had covered the sun. The rooms darkened early. The house changed when daylight faded. Corners deepened. Hallways felt longer. Small sounds became easier to notice. I told myself I would pack one bag and leave after dinner. I never packed the bag, because around 6:30, I heard Margaret crying. It came from upstairs, soft at first. The kind of crying someone does when they think no one can hear them. I stood so fast the chair scraped across the floor. For one stupid second, grief overpowered fear. I thought maybe some part of me wanted it to be real. I called her name and ran to the stairs. The crying stopped the moment I reached the landing. Every room upstairs was empty. Margaret's bedroom door stood open. Nothing inside had moved. No one in the hall. No one in the guest room. No one in the bathroom. I checked closets anyway. Then as I stepped back into the hallway, laughter. A quick burst of laughter from behind me. Young, male, familiar enough to freeze me where I stood. It was Tyler, my childhood best friend. We hadn't spoken in 12 years. He moved away after middle school. Different cities, different lives, but that laugh had been unmistakable. He used to laugh with one sharp inhale before the sound came out. I turned so fast my shoulder hit the wall. The hallway was empty. Then the laughter came again, this time from inside Margaret's room. Shorter, closer. I didn't go in. I backed down the stairs one step at a time without taking my eyes off the doorway. By the time I reached the bottom, the laughter had ended. I grabbed my keys from the kitchen counter. That should have been the moment I left. Instead, I stopped, because another sound had started. A voice, low, weak, from beneath the kitchen floor. My voice, not similar, not close. Mine, the exact rhythm I use when I'm exhausted, the exact catch in the throat after too little sleep. It said only 4 words. Help me, Ethan, please. I dropped the keys. They hit tile and spun. The voice came again, a little farther away now, as if moving under the house.
Help me!
Help me. There is no fear like hearing yourself in pain. It tears straight through logic. Because part of your mind knows it's impossible, and another part hears suffering and wants to answer. I backed against the counter and covered my mouth. The voice beneath the floor began softly crying. Then silence. Then my phone rang. So loud, I shouted. The screen lit up in my hand. No contact. No caller ID. Only one word. Unknown. My thumb hovered over decline. Then I accepted the call. I couldn't hear breathing. Couldn't hear static. Couldn't hear traffic or background noise. Only 3 hollow knocks. Close. Wooden. Directly under me. 1, 2, 3. Then a whisper through the phone speaker. My own voice. Don't hang up. The line went dead. I was out the front door before the phone screen went black. I don't remember grabbing my jacket. I don't remember locking the house. I only remember the air outside feeling colder than it had any right to be. The kind of cold that clears panic for a few seconds and replaces it with action. I crossed the gravel road and went straight to Walter's porch. He was already there, sitting in the same chair as before, as if he knew exactly when I'd come. I didn't bother pretending anymore. I asked him what was under the house. Walter didn't answer right away. He looked past me toward Margaret's place, then toward the tree line behind it. Only after that did he speak. "You hear voices yet?" I said yes. He nodded once, like I had confirmed something unpleasant but expected. Then he told me to sit down. I stayed standing. Walter sighed and began anyway. He said the house wasn't built all at once. The original place was smaller. Just kitchen, porch, 2 rooms. But in 1948, Margaret's father hired men from town to tear up part of the foundation and build a chamber beneath the upstairs bedroom. Not a cellar, not storage, a sealed room. No windows, no outside door, only access from inside the house. When I asked why anyone would build that under a bedroom, Walter looked at me for a long time before answering. Because they were trying to keep something in one place. I laughed once. Not because it was funny, because the sentence sounded insane. Walter didn't react. He continued like he'd said nothing unusual. A month before the room was built, men cleaning the old stone well behind the property found something lodged deep in the shaft, wrapped in roots and mud. Too large for an animal, too human-shaped to ignore. No one agreed on what it was. Some said bones. Some said a body. Some said it moved before they pulled it clear. Whatever came out of that, well, the stories changed depending on who told them. But every version ended the same way. After it was found, sounds began inside the house. Knocking in walls. Voices in empty rooms. Names spoken at night. Margaret's father brought ministers, workers, hunters, anyone who claimed to know what to do. Nothing lasted, so they built the room under the floor. Walter said the sounds quieted after that. Not gone, just lower, contained. Then he leaned closer and lowered his voice. The first people who heard it too often started talking wrong. I asked what that meant. He rubbed his jaw like he regretted speaking at all, then said, "Same voices, wrong words." He told me one woman spoke to her husband using her dead mother's phrases. A man answered questions before they were asked. Another person woke speaking in accents they never had. Small things at first, then stranger things. People repeating sentences no one in the room had said. People hearing their own voice coming from another floor. People talking in sleep to someone under the house. I wanted to interrupt, to tell him this was town legend built on grief and gossip. But he said one thing next that stopped me cold. "Your grandmother stopped using the phone for 20 years. I remembered that. She hated calls. Always said letters were better. I thought it was stubbornness. Walter said it wasn't stubbornness. It was because the last time she answered a late-night call, she hurt herself on the line. Then came the disappearances. Not dramatic vanishings. No police tape. No headlines. Just owners leaving one by one. A cousin moved in for 2 weeks and drove away before dawn. An uncle inherited part of the property, signed it over, and never stepped inside again. A renter stayed 3 nights, packed half his belongings, and left the rest behind. Others simply stopped being mentioned. Families do that when the truth sounds worse than silence. I asked Walter why Margaret stayed. He looked at the house again. Longer this time. Then said, "Some people don't stay because they want to." Wind moved through the trees behind us. Somewhere across the road, a board in the old house creaked. Walter stood up slowly, gripping the porch rail. The conversation was over. I asked him one final question. "What happens now?" He met my eyes for the first time since I arrived. And what he said next made everything inside me go still. If it knows your voice now, it won't stop. I should have driven away after that. The keys were in my pocket. The road out of town was clear. Daylight still had another hour left. Everything required to leave was already in my hands. But Walter's last sentence did something worse than frighten me. It gave shape to what was happening. Until then, the house had been mystery. Sounds, warnings, stories told in half-truths. But once he said it knew my voice, every moment inside that place rearranged itself into meaning. The phone call, my own voice under the kitchen floor, the whispers, the timing. It wasn't random. It was learning. And if something learns you, leaving may not matter. So I crossed the road and went back inside. The house felt different now that I believed Walter. Not haunted, occupied. I stood in the front hall listening. No knocks, no voices, no movement upstairs. Just the low wooden hush of an old place pretending to be empty. I went straight to Margaret's bedroom. The rug was still folded against the wall where I had left it. The exposed boards waited in the center of the room like a wound. I knelt beside the square of resealed nails and ran my fingers along the seams. There had to be a latch. There had to be some way they opened it before. I pressed each plank. Nothing. I pulled at nail heads with a claw hammer. Nothing. Then I noticed one board near the bed leg sat slightly higher than the others. Not enough to see from standing. Enough to feel. I slid a screwdriver into the gap and pried upward. The wood lifted with a crack so loud I nearly dropped it. Dust burst into the air. A cold draft rose from below. Not cellar cold. Deeper than that. The kind of cold spaces keep when sunlight has forgotten them. I widened the opening board by board until a black rectangle appeared beneath the floor. A hidden hatch. No handle on top. Only bolts on the inside. Someone had designed it to be open from the room and locked from below. I stared into the opening for several seconds before shining my flashlight down. Stairs. Narrow wooden stairs descending steeply into darkness. Too steep for comfort. Too narrow to turn around easily. I called out once. No answer. I don't know why that disappointed me. Maybe because silence felt worse now. I took the flashlight, the hammer, and started down. Each step groaned under my weight. The walls closed in immediately. Whoever built it had lined both sides with thick insulation panels nailed over studs. Not for warmth, for sound. The deeper I went, the more the house above seemed to disappear. By the time I reached the bottom, even my own breathing sounded far away. The beam of the flashlight swept across a room smaller than I expected. No windows, low ceiling, bare concrete floor, shelves on 3 walls, and every shelf was full. Hundreds of cassette tapes, labeled in black marker, dates, names, single words. Some labels had been crossed out and written over again. Others were blank. I stepped closer to read them. Margaret, July. Call log. Night 3. Ethan. Age. 7. Do not play. I stopped breathing for a second. My name. My age. A tape made when I was 7 years old. I had never been down there. At least, I didn't think I had. Then the flashlight rose to the ceiling. An old microphone hung from a cable directly in the center of the room, suspended over a wooden chair bolted to the floor. The chair faced the far corner of the basement. Not the stairs, not the shelves, the darkness. There was nothing in that corner except shadow the flashlight couldn't fully hold. I moved the beam lower. The concrete there was scarred. Scratches, deep grooves, circular drag marks. as if something heavy had been pulled forward again and again, then taken back. My mouth had gone dry. I wanted to run upstairs. Instead, I kept looking. Because on the wall above the chair, carved in large, uneven letters, was the sentence no family should ever need to write. Keep it talking or it comes up. I read it twice. Then 3 knocks sounded above me. From the bedroom floor overhead, something was in the room I had just left, and I was now beneath it. I didn't move when the knocks came from above. 3 strikes through the ceiling, directly over the hidden hatch. Slow, heavy, then silence again. I stood in that underground room holding the flashlight so tightly my hand hurt. Something was upstairs in Margaret's bedroom, something standing over the opening I had just used. And the only way out was the staircase beneath it. Every instinct told me to run, but fear had already changed into something else by then. A need to understand. Because if I climbed those stairs without answers, I knew I'd hear those knocks in my head for the rest of my life. So instead of running, I turned toward the shelves. Hundreds of tapes. Years of labels. Years of nights. Margaret hadn't just known about this place. She had lived around it, managed it, endured it. On a small workbench near the wall sat an old cassette recorder connected to the hanging microphone by a cracked cable. The machine was dusty but plugged into a power strip that still glowed red. Someone had used it recently. My throat tightened. I chose the nearest tape. No label. I inserted it and pressed play. A man's voice filled the room immediately. Steady, low, continuous. Not speaking to anyone, just talking. Weather reports, names of towns, baseball scores, prices from grocery stores, road directions, anything. No pauses longer than a breath. He sounded exhausted, but determined to keep words moving. The tape ran for nearly a minute before ending mid-sentence. No goodbye, no silence, just cut off. I ejected it and grabbed another. This one was labeled June 14. A woman's voice began counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. No emotion, no rhythm, just numbers. When she reached 100, she started again from 1. I skipped forward, still counting. Near the end, her voice was cracking badly. She coughed between numbers, but she never stopped. The tape clicked dead at 72. I stared at the recorder, then chose another. Christmas. Children singing. Softly at first, then louder. Old holiday songs I recognized from school. Between verses, an older man hurried them back in. Keep going. Again. Louder. Again. I could hear fear beneath the singing. Children trying to stay cheerful because an adult needed them to. Tape end. Another tape. March night 2. Prayers. Several voices together. Fast. Overlapping. Some whispering, some crying, some speaking too quickly to understand. A chair scraped. Someone said it moved. The prayers got louder, then cut. I kept going. Story after story. Family members reading cookbooks, reciting newspaper articles, telling childhood memories, naming all 50 states, describing every object in a room, anything that produced sound, anything that kept silence away. Every tape taught the same lesson. They weren't recording messages. They were feeding the room, keeping something occupied, keeping it listening. My hands had begun shaking again when I reached the final tape on the top shelf. Written in Margaret's careful letters, last if needed. I knew before pressing play that I shouldn't. I played it anyway. At first, there was only breathing. Weak, uneven. Then Margaret's voice. Much older than on the tape upstairs. Thin, drained. She was speaking into the microphone directly. I could hear the closeness of her mouth to it. She was reading from something. Recipes, garden notes, names of neighbors, phone numbers. Then long pauses where she struggled to continue. A cough, a shaky inhale, then more words. She was buying time with language, holding something back one sentence at a time. Minutes passed. Her voice frayed further with each one. Then finally she stopped reading. There was a silence so sudden it made my skin tighten. And in that silence, I heard a faint movement from the dark corner of the room. Margaret began crying softly. Not loud, not dramatic. The kind of crying that happens when someone has no strength left for fear. Then she said 6 words I will never forget. I'm too tired to continue. The tape hissed. For 2 full seconds, there was nothing. Then from behind me, a loud wooden creak. The staircase. Something had just stepped onto it. I turned so fast, the flashlight beam slammed across the walls. The staircase was empty. At least, it looked empty. The narrow steps rose toward the hatch in a tight line of shadow and wood, disappearing into the opening above. Nothing standing there. Nothing visible moving. But the creak had been real. Fresh. Close. The kind of sound weight makes. I backed away from the stairs slowly, keeping the light fixed on them. My heart was beating so hard it blurred the edges of everything. I told myself the house was settling. I told myself old wood reacts to pressure changes. I told myself anything that sounded sane. Then the basement light went out. Not dimmed. Not flickered. Gone. The small bulb overhead snapped into darkness, so suddenly the room felt larger and closer at the same time. Only my flashlight remained. Its beam shook in my hand. The shelves of tapes became tall black shapes. The hanging microphone swayed slightly above the chair. I hadn't touched it. I know I hadn't touched it. The cable moved with a gentle side-to-side motion, like something had brushed past it. I stepped backward. My heel struck the bolted chair. The sound echoed too far. Then from below the staircase, 3 knocks. Not above me this time. Not in the room overhead. Below the stairs. From somewhere deeper than the basement floor. 1, 2, 3. My body locked in place. There was no space below those stairs. I had come down them. I had seen solid floor at the base, but the knocks had come from underneath. A hidden layer beneath the hidden room. I raised the flashlight toward the underside of the steps. Dust drifted through the beam. Nothing else. Then a voice came from the dark beneath the staircase. My voice. Perfectly mine. The same rasp from fear. The same breathing between words. The same exact tone I use when trying to stay calm. It said, "You can rest now." A pause. Then, "I'll take over." I screamed. I don't remember deciding to. The sound tore out of me before thought. I lunged for the stairs and hit the first step hard enough to bruise my shin. Behind me, something moved. Not fast. Not chasing. Standing. Then footsteps began climbing. Slow. Heavy. 1 step at a time. Not from behind me. From beneath me. As if another staircase existed under the one I was using. Every step I climbed was answered by one below. I took 2 at a time. The footsteps below matched pace. I slipped, caught myself on the wall, nearly dropped the flashlight. The beam spun once across the room. For less than a second, it lit the chair. Someone was sitting in it. My shape, my clothes, my face lowered in shadow. Then the beam hit the wall and was gone. I reached the hatch and shoved upward. It didn't move. I shoved again. Still locked. Bolts. On the outside now. Someone had sealed it from the bedroom. The footsteps below stopped. Silence filled the stairwell. Then my voice drifted upward from just a few steps beneath me, closer than before. Calm, steady, patient. Ethan. A hand touched the bottom of my shoe. I kicked backward with everything I had. My heel connected with something soft enough to move, hard enough to be real. A sound came from below the stairs. Not pain, laughter. My laughter. I drove my shoulder into the hatch again. Once. Twice. On the third hit, the wood burst upward and I spilled into Margaret's bedroom on my hands and knees. I slammed the hatch shut behind me and dragged the bed across it without thinking. The room was dark. I had left the lamp on downstairs. I knew I had. Now every light in the house was out. Only my flashlight remained, weak and shaking. I ran into the hallway. The upstairs felt wrong immediately. Too long. The hall stretched farther than it should have, the far wall several steps beyond where I knew it ended. Margaret's room should have been 3 doors from the stairs. Now there were 5. I stopped dead. Each door looked old. Each knob looked familiar. I did not remember 2 of them existing. Somewhere behind me, inside the bedroom, 3 knocks sounded beneath the bed. I ran. The staircase was still there, but lower than it should have been. Too many steps. I nearly fell, taking them 2 at a time. At the bottom, I turned toward the kitchen. It wasn't there. The front hall opened into the dining room. The dining room opened into a narrow corridor I had never seen before. Wallpaper peeled in strips along both sides. Frames hung crooked on the walls. Every frame was empty. I backed away and turned left. Now the kitchen appeared where the living room should have been. Same cabinets. Same table. Same sink. Wrong place. My flashlight beam shook across the counter. My keys were still there. Exactly where I dropped them. I grabbed them and rushed to the front door. The deadbolt turned. The knob turned. The door did not move. I pulled harder. Nothing. I threw my shoulder into it. The wood shuddered but stayed sealed. I tried the back door. Jammed. I tried every downstairs window. None of them lifted. Not painted shut. Not stuck from age. Held. As if pressure from the outside kept them closed. I pulled out my phone. No signal. No bars. No Wi-Fi. No service provider name. Just a blank screen corner where connection should have been. My battery read 82%. Then 81. Then 82 again. I opened the clock app. Frozen. 2:17 a.m. Seconds not moving. I checked my watch. Also 2:17. The microwave display across the kitchen glowed the same time. Every clock in sight had stopped there. Then I heard footsteps upstairs. 1 step. Pause. Another step. Pause. I held my breath. The rhythm was familiar. Because it was mine. The exact pace I use when trying not to make noise. The slight delay after every 3rd step from an old ankle injury. I had never noticed that rhythm until hearing someone else use it. Something was walking across the 2nd floor the way I walk. Slowly. Learning the house with my body. Then it reached the top of the stairs and began coming down. I stood in the kitchen holding my breath while my own footsteps came down the stairs. Slow, unhurried, certain. 1 board creaked on the 4th step, then the 6th, then the landing. Exactly where I would place my weight. I backed toward the hallway and raised the flashlight. Nothing appeared. No shape. No shadow. Only sound. The steps crossed the floor above me, then stopped directly over my head. The ceiling gave 1 soft knock in reply. That was the moment I understood something important. Running was useless. The doors were closed. The house was changing, and whatever lived there could move through it more easily than I could. But there was one thing I had seen it respond to every time. Voices, the tapes, the warnings, the microphone, the sentence on the wall. Keep it talking or it comes up. I looked toward Margaret's bedroom, then toward the hidden hatch beneath the bed. Every part of me wanted distance from that room. Instead, I walked back upstairs. The footsteps above me matched each step I took. When I stopped, they stopped. When I moved again, they moved again. By the time I reached the bedroom door, my hands were numb. The bed had shifted slightly off the hatch, as if pushed from below. I dragged it aside, opened the floor, took the recorder from the shelf downstairs, and returned to the chair in the basement. I did not sit in it. I stood beside it, set the recorder running, and spoke into the hanging microphone. At first, nothing came out. My throat had tightened too badly. Then I forced words through it. My name, my birthday, my first school, the street where we used to live. I spoke about childhood summers, the smell of Margaret's kitchen, the dog named Rusty, my friend Tyler falling from his bike and pretending not to cry. I listed baseball teams, state capitals, movies I hated, songs I barely remembered, anything. Every time I paused longer than a second, I panicked and started again. So I filled the room with language, stories that mattered, stories that didn't, true things, false things. I described vacations that never happened, people I never met, cities I'd never visited. I invented cousins, invented injuries, invented weddings, invented entire years of my life. If it learned through answers, I wanted to poison every lesson. The room remained still. No knocks, no footsteps, no whisper. Only my voice and the hiss of the recorder. At some point, I lost track of time. My throat burned. My jaw ached. My knees trembled from standing. But silence never interrupted me. That frightened me more than noise, because it sounded like attention. Hours passed that way, or what felt like hours. Then exhaustion did what fear couldn't. It made me careless. I stopped speaking. The room stayed silent. I swallowed hard and asked the question I had promised myself not to ask. What are you? Nothing answered. I almost laughed from relief. Then from the dark corner beyond the chair came a voice. Not mine, not Margaret's, not male, not female. A voice made of several voices trying to speak at once. Close, calm, ancient with wear. It said, the part of your family that stayed. After it spoke, I don't remember screaming. I don't remember dropping the recorder. I don't remember climbing the stairs. There are moments fear erases out of kindness. The next clear memory I have is sunlight. Real sunlight, warm across my face. I was lying on the bedroom floor beside the open hatch. The room was bright and quiet. No cold draft rising from below. No footsteps. No whisper. Just morning. For several seconds I stayed there, waiting for the house to correct itself. It didn't. Birds outside. Wind through trees. A truck passing somewhere down the road. Ordinary sounds. I looked at the clock on the nightstand. The numbers were moving again. 8:43 a.m. I stared at them long enough to watch the minute change. Then I forced myself to stand. My legs felt weak, like I'd been sick for days. The hatch beneath the bed was closed. Not hidden, just closed. The boards sat flush in place as if they had never been pried open. The rug was rolled back across the center of the room. Smooth, straight. I know I hadn't done that. I stepped into the hallway. Normal length. 3 doors. No extra rooms. No warped corridor. No empty frames I didn't recognize. Downstairs, every light worked. The kitchen was where it belonged. The front door opened on the first turn. So did the back. Every window lifted easily. My phone had full signal. Voicemails from my mother. 2 missed calls from the realtor. Battery at 78%. No unknown number in the recent calls list. I checked anyway. 3 times. Nothing. I went back to the basement one final time. I moved the bed, pulled the rug, lifted the boards. No hatch. Only solid subfloor beneath them. No staircase. No hidden room. No shelves. No chair. No microphone. No tapes. Nothing except old wood and dust. That should have comforted me. Instead, it frightened me more than anything else. Because it meant one of 2 things. Either none of it happened, or the house knew how to put itself back together. I packed in less than an hour. Didn't sort boxes. Didn't keep furniture. Didn't take family records. I left with clothes, my wallet, the car keys, and 1 photograph of Margaret from years earlier. I signed the sale papers through an attorney 2 weeks later. Never stepped on the property again. Never answered calls from that town. Never asked Walter another question. Months passed. Then more months. I moved into a 3rd-floor apartment 3 states away. Concrete building. Steel framing. No crawl space. No old wood. No history. I slept better there than I had in years. I stopped checking clocks. Stopped listening to floors. Stopped thinking about Margaret's house except in brief flashes I could push away. Then one night, I woke suddenly for no reason. The room was dark. My phone screen glowed on the nightstand. I picked it up. 2:17 a.m. I remember smiling once at my own nerves. Then, from beneath the floor of my new apartment, 3 knocks. 1, 2, 3. I stayed completely still. Phone light in my hand. Dark room around me. The sound did not come again. No footsteps. No whisper. No second warning. Just the memory of those 3 knocks moving through the floor beneath my bed. And the feeling that distance had never mattered. That maybe it was never tied to the house. Maybe it was tied to whoever answered. I don't know what I would do if it happened again. I don't know what you would do either. So tell me this. If you heard knocking under your floor at 2:17 a.m., would you answer? Would you stay in the room? Would you open the floor? Or would you leave everything behind and run? Comment below. And if you want more true scary stories with sound, subscribe now, before it follows you too.